And I see a huge effort from government members to cover up for Lulinha, instead of just saying, if he's corrupt, let him answer for it. The father talks, but he's just pretending, he's joking.
Lula's son, Fabio, doesn't have any contract that he signed with the Brazilian state. Third, we all think that whoever makes a mistake has to answer for it, and no one is above the law. But I remember that meeting you attended with Bolsonaro, when he said that the federal police wouldn't investigate his son, and he removed Moro after that to interfere with the federal police. Today, the sector of the federal police that's coordinating the process is under André Mendonça. There's this talk that the federal police belongs to the PT. Second, I find it interesting. Explain to me the origin of Flavio's assets. He had a public job for a while and has assets, but that mansion of his is underreported. That 6 million mansion, he has no explanation for it. What they tell me is it's a payroll kickback scheme. What they tell me is it's money from militiamen. What they tell me is that it exists and this 4-car issue is bribery. Don't tell me otherwise. That's 3. 3 times 3 billion, 4 times 4 of 3 billion in deposits in Rio de Janeiro at Master. How do you charge a bank that's about to go under? The guy was already wearing an ankle monitor and he charges that. Do you think that's a loan from Mr. Butterfly? You remember that character, Mr. Butterfly, who had nothing? So this party, this group you were part of, is a group of people, sorry, but the Bolsonaro family. It's a group of people who got rich through crime in Rio de Janeiro, who became wealthy by diverting public funds. This 4-car money is a bribe. That's what the 4-car money is called. And I find it interesting, you're not just making excuses here. You've turned into a full-on shield, completely covering for them. Over this family issue, Bolsonaro, explain where the assets came from. And Eduardo is no longer with the federal police. He was fired. He's not a congressman anymore. He has no source of income. He lives off that money that's over there in the United States from 4-car, corruption money, right? So 134 billion. And the INSS scandal started during your government. You removed all the rules that led to the INSS scandal.
Salles, we have 1,500 people live right now, guys. Keep it up. Let's get to 5,000 soon. We're going to read the super chats. Your second question, 2 minutes. If you want to comment on anything as well, feel free. Thank you.
Guys, thank you. No, obviously, we're going to keep pushing here. I think Lulinha is up to something shady. Paulo argues that Flavio is up to something shady. The only thing I have to say is this. If Flavio has to explain his actions, then let him explain. I've already told you, my opinion about Flavio's phone call to 4-car is to condemn it. I don't cover up for anyone, not at all. I don't even know where he got his assets from, and I don't care. I was never part of Flavio's political group. I served as a minister under his father. His father is an impeccable man when it comes to honesty. You can criticize his ideology, that's a different matter. His father, after having been a congressman, I don't know how many times, president of the republic and everything, he's an impeccable man. In terms of corruption, ethics, all of that. Now, I wanted to go back to the economic issue. Paulo was saying, he gave a series of numbers, data here, talking about jobs, this and that, these conflicts.
I see here, Salles, you tell me about this. The Supreme Federal Court accepted the charges and Salles became a defendant on charges of involvement in an illegal smuggling scheme. Operación Aquanduba. Here is a complaint. There is no charges against Lula's son. I wanted to ask you about this operation. Secondly, to tell you that trying to involve President Lula in these things, I was part of a government that didn't have any corruption scandals. I was part of a government where President Lula said if someone does wrong, they should pay. And if someone is accused, they leave the government and go answer for it. After they've answered, it's resolved. But I wanted to ask, this story you mentioned about the painting, he said today that it was a joke he made and that he paid for the rest. But he stepped down to answer for it because he wouldn't compromise the government. But the question I want to ask, Salles, since you decided to go down this path, is to ask about Operation Aquanduba in September 2025. The Supreme Court accepted the charges and Salles became a defendant accused of involvement in an illegal smuggling scheme. What do you have to say about that? Because unlike Lula's son, you are a defendant. He is not a defendant yet. So I'd like to hear from you about this operation.
Unlike Lula, during Bolsonaro's government, the PF, the PT-affiliated part of the federal police, had the freedom to work. The PT-affiliated federal police commissioner who reported this handed it over to half a dozen prosecutors, also PT-affiliated, and together they filed a completely absurd charge. I'm a lawyer from São Paulo. I have nothing to do with the timber industry or anything like that. But I answered the charges, and obviously, I have nothing to hide.
Lastly, I wanted to ask you a question, Salles. In 2019, under your command as minister, there were 10,119 square kilometers of deforestation. In 2020, 10,851 square kilometers of increased deforestation. 13,000 in 2021, you were the minister. 22, 11,000. Look at Lula's government. 23, 9,000. 24, 6,500. 25, 5,700. 26, 2,874. It went from your 13,000 to 2,874. Here it's Marina Silva, the minister. What explains this peak in deforestation in Brazil under your command at the Ministry of the Environment?
Look, it's actually interesting that you bring this up because the record for deforestation in Brazil was during Lula's government with Marina as minister. But that wasn't the previous government back in 2004, 2005, and 2006. It was 3 times that. It was 14,000 square kilometers. Marina Silva. It really went down, they did some work to reduce it, and then it went back up during Dilma's government. And it kept rising during Dilma's government, Michel Temer, and it went up under Bolsonaro, really, while I was a minister. The deforestation of the Amazon, you can solve it in 2 ways. You can solve it with total and absolute repression, along with suffocating the population, which is what Marina is doing. In other words, she reduced deforestation, that's true, but she's making the lives of the 26 million Brazilians in the Amazon a living hell.
Marina, with her arrival, a lot of money was put into the Amazon Fund. And it was with this money that we supported the cooperative. It was with this money that we are reforesting through productive forest and agroforestry systems. And it's with this money that we are repairing much of the damage your government caused and the environmental crime it allowed in the Amazon. Right? You say that Brazil has no responsibility, not for emissions. It's low, and we are zeroing emissions and deforestation. Now we have a forest. This is a heritage that cannot be destroyed, and under your government, you allowed it to be destroyed. You allowed the day of fire. You allowed crime to come in. About the indigenous issue, Salles, let me tell you something. The most dramatic scene we had in Brazil was when President Lula went to visit the Yanomami indigenous people, and they were dying. From hunger, from the neglect of your government, there in the state of Roraima. President Lula went there, expelled the miners. We restored the fields together with them, with technical assistance for them. Healthcare went in there. Today, the situation of the Yanomami indigenous people has improved a lot. The Parecis you mentioned, we went there to support the Parecis, and they are producing food in Mato Grosso, unlike you, who allowed and let criminals enter to mine on indigenous land. There was tree cutting, deforestation, fire, people exploiting minerals on indigenous land, and your government was linked to these criminal groups. Another thing, those 26 million people who live in the Amazon, most of them live in large urban centers. And what are we doing there? We are encouraging industrialization, the pharmaceutical industry, the chemical industry, the whole metals, metallurgy, electronics, and agri-food production chain in that region. That is a resource we need to know how to make use of.
And Ricardo Salles, what did you mean by push everything through when you were a minister, and about the illegal export of timber during your administration? 3 minutes.
Well, it has already been proven that the illegal export was a lie, that it didn't happen, so much so that the Federal Public Prosecutor's Office itself has already requested my acquittal. That false narrative is over. Second, push everything through is something that Brazil, obviously in the right way, should have done, as I suggested. Reduce bureaucracy, lower taxes, remove obstacles. Brazil is hell for entrepreneurs. When I said that in that meeting, and I repeat it here, that all the ministries in Bolsonaro's government, just like those in Lula's, Just like any ministries have an obligation to reduce bureaucracy, to decrease the number of rules, make life easier for entrepreneurs, make life easier for business owners.
Look, what Salles just said makes it clear. While Brazil is worried about the pandemic, we're going to push everything through. That explains it.
Look, in 2019, 10,000 square kilometers of deforestation. In 2020, 10,851 square kilometers of deforestation. In 2021, 13,000 square kilometers of deforestation. In 2022, 11,000 square kilometers of deforestation. That was what he pushed through. He stopped deforesting because he was answering to the agribusiness that wanted land.
Land in the Amazon, illegal agribusiness, criminal agribusiness. And what is the result of Marina, who closed the gate in 2026?
2,000 square kilometers of deforestation. Therefore, the last year, the peak here under Ricardo was 13,081 square kilometers of deforestation. The peak.
Under Marina, she brought this down to 2,874. She closed the gate. That's what happened. And one thing I found interesting, what you said, Ricardo, you said that people should have the freedom to choose whether to get vaccinated or not. How about with a contagious disease? A child who goes to the classroom and isn't vaccinated against measles will end up spreading it to others.
The whole Bolsonaro vaccine thing is over. I've already told you I'm in favor. I've already gotten vaccinated. My family got vaccinated. What are we going to do here in São Paulo? With two fake senators who have nothing to do with us here in São Paulo. Nothing. Zero. They've never done anything for our state. Marina even harmed our agriculture with her system. And Simone harmed our state with this discrimination. Both when she was a senator and now as Minister of Planning. This is the most important issue.
Hey, Salles, you can't hide that whole phrase, let the herd pass, because it's directly linked to deforestation. Your legacy was deforestation. Marina's was reducing it. Your legacy was deforestation. Simone's is that of a senator for proper agribusiness. The
Agribusiness hates
No,
her.
please, but don't interrupt me. I didn't interrupt you. Come on.
Please.
Can you go back to that? You can go back to that, right?
Põe aí, Roberto.
He answered. Give me my time back.
Ups aí, cara. O povo vê isso aí. Realmente o Paulo não te interrompeu hora nenhuma.
Yeah.
O povo reclama depois.
Go back there. Okay, let's go. All right, let's go. Well, so Marina is the reference point on deforestation and environmental preservation in a world facing an environmental crisis. Simone is an example of environmentally responsible, lawful, serious agribusiness, which is the majority of Brazilian agriculture, not the criminal agribusiness that had support under your administration, right? And look, they're coming to São Paulo. Marina is already a senator here. He is already a representative here. Thank you very much. And Simone has a house here. Her daughters live here. She pays taxes here. And it's a great contribution. Três Lagoas is next to Andradina. It's more like São Paulo than Mato Grosso do Sul. Therefore, she is ours. And why are we offering these two names? Because they are the best candidates for the Senate from São Paulo. They are the two best names for the Senate for São Paulo. It's Marina Silva and Simone Tebet.